Yeah, so towards the end of the war. So the questions were just saying a lot. It was mixed territory.
But you'll let me know when we're ready to start.
When they were pushing the poles from there to the German side, and it was just like moving people. Yeah, it's a long story. Where you're going to put it strategically. Yeah, so why should we?
To the left.
I'm sitting back. Yes, correct.
That's fine. Is he coming? Is he coming?
Rose see if I can go for extra space, it's up to him. But there's no option to filter, everyone can see and reflect your questions.
Two standing mics. We're going to go one by one, I think. And she's still going to... Do you have any more mics? Yeah, 15, okay. My bags are there, my phone's there.
We'll just give it a couple more minutes for people online to join and anyone who's late to enter the room, and then we can start. Okay, I think we can go ahead and start. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today in this panel discussion. And thanks as well to all the people who joined us online. I know the difficulty of following online. I live my life online now, working remotely and joining all these meetings and events. And so thanks for joining online as well. As you all know, the title of the session is Strengthening the Domestic Private Sector in FCV. But what we're really going to be talking about is really about jobs. And I think we can all agree, and there's plenty of evidence, that fragility and conflict and how to escape from them is all about the expansion of productive jobs. I personally know this too well from my own country. I come from Yemen, and I saw it both as a youth activist and then as a minister of youth. And I heard from so many young and jobless Yemenis that for them, the options are really simple. It is either they wait for death to come to their homes, or they pick up a gun and go meet it elsewhere and at least get paid for it. And that is what it comes down to, especially when there's a conflict in the country. The jobs that we so desperately need in FCV situations and contexts are created, of course, primarily by the private sector. Modern firms that can harness what good economists call the economies of scale and specialization. But that's what we're missing in a lot of fragile contexts. There are too few firms. The typical person works solo. People are stuck in low productivity and therefore in poverty. And the majority of firms in FCV contexts are micro and small and medium, and they are domestic. There's very little foreign investment that flows into such countries. And as we heard this morning from Maktar Diop, foreign investors are usually the first to leave when conflict erupts, which is why this session focuses really on domestic private sector. And we are very lucky to have an excellent panel to speak about this topic. We have His Excellency Mohamed Biavodi, the former Prime Minister of Guinea and Special Envoy for the 13th replenishment of IFAD. We have Lala Boli, the CEO of Saudi Gas APC in Burkina Faso. And we have Alexander Larac, who's the Vice President of Operations of the Caribbean Bottling Company in Haiti. And we have Olivier Buyoya, the West Africa Regional Director for IFC. So we're going to cover all of this from different angles, as you see from the diversity of our panelists. And I invite those of you who are online to use the chat function. Feel free to engage as we are speaking, but also to put up any questions that you have. And at towards the end of the panel, we'll get those questions and answer them, and also any questions from the floor. We're going to start with Your Excellency, Mohammed, and talk about governments. And that's what the top challenge cited by many private sector investors and companies in fragile states is political instability, regulatory environment, the difficult policy frameworks that are not conducive. And you've been at the head of government. How can governments better support the growth of local private sector and design growth policies? And I know from your very long and deep experience in this field, you can share with us maybe some practical examples of how governments can do this.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to IFC for inviting me to this forum. This is the first time I'm participating, but it is really, I'm seeing how important it is, because we are speaking about fragility. Normally, we'll come in this type of forums with the hope that the issue on the table is going to improve. But everybody is saying that by 2030, there will be even more fragile situations than we have today. So therefore, the work ahead of us is really extremely challenging, intensive, and imagination, pragmatism, creativity will not be enough really to propose solutions. Yes, fragile states are confronted first of all with the incapacity of government to provide services to its people. That's the principal characteristic that comes out, because when a government is capable, the government can resolve the problems. You will not have problem of insecurity. You will not have at least problem of massive corruption. There is corruption everywhere, it's true. But there will be at least in the boundaries that do not disturb normal life for people, access to education, health, etc. And unfortunately, in fragile states, this is not the case. And looking at the prospects and the recent evaluation and the proposals that are being thought of course, we need to address this issue. And it is being addressed, and let's pay tribute to IFC, the World Bank, for taking this issue very seriously. It is clear that the challenges are many, but the most important one is the challenge of helping people to be able to secure their own livelihood. okay, to secure their own livelihood. And we know that the best way to do that, the best way to create wealth, to create jobs, is the private sector. And it's not me to repeat what Director Mokhtar was saying this morning. The most effective way and the best way to make those jobs sustainable is the local private sector, characterized by SMEs, because most of them are small enterprises, among which many are from the rural sector and smallholder farmers. It's time finally to recognize really that farming is a business, and these people give us 70% of the food at least we eat in Africa. So now, one will not invent what is the priority in terms of policies, regulations, rules, and practices to support private sector in fragile countries. Number one, I think, is to make sure that security is available in the country. Without security, there is nothing you can do. When you have gangs around, when you have rules of law that is not secured by the state security, it is extremely difficult. So allow me to use the word good-willing governments. Good-willing governments coming in, good-willing government should make sure that security is there. Without security, business is difficult. The second element that is important in terms of supporting private sector is strengthening, but more specifically, simplifying rules, procedures, regulations in order to allow private sector to strive in a square environment, but not an environment that adds burdening to the private sector. See, frequently we speak about policies, we start writing rules, writing principles, putting KPIs when they are sitting in the ministries, and in the end, forgetting that we are talking about people, very simple people, people that we need to consult, we need to deal with when we are designing our policies. If you want policies really to be effective, you need to design them with people. But one of the problems that you meet in fragile state is the lack of organization of small-scale enterprises to defend their own interest, or at least to participate in the dialogue with the government in order to create those policies that are needed and conducive. And therefore, one of the areas, and this is a role of the institution, and IFC did that very well in Guinea, in supporting the small enterprises, those who were in the informal sector through what we call the chambre de commerce, and those who were in the bigger, more corporate aspect of companies in the, how you call it, le patronat, okay? And this allowed really these two entities to discuss with their own people, because they were decentralized all over the country, and then bring the issues. It was much easier for the government to be able to define what are the priorities and where are the areas. And it was even more effective. This helped really effectively to discuss the subsidization of food, imported food, in particular rice. You know, how could we keep the price of rice at an acceptable level? You know, and without this kind of organization, you can't do that. So the third point one should pay attention for is unlocking the market for SMEs, facilitating market access. Again, I will say reducing the burden on market. See, frequently we have the impression that it is important to create rules, but the reality is that we just need to reduce rules because there are too many of them. And I think particularly regarding the market, while we are promoting government procurement, etc., what we have to look And again, important to listen at the small-scale enterprises themselves. Listen at them and listen what are the problems, what can we solve, before looking at new rules and new procedures. Many cannot access finance they need, and we need to develop instruments that are adapted to finance these small-scale enterprises. The banks are far, and small-scale enterprises are too small. There is therefore a need, particularly for DFIs, to be imaginative and creative. Think, what kind of bridge can we bring between these two? In many African countries now, you take Cote d'Ivoire, you take Cameroon, they are small enterprises, private sector enterprises, private sector entities, made of people that are coming out of the banks, that are creating financing facilities, which can be accessed by small-scale enterprises. And these are very, very effective. I think it is really useful that we start understanding more that kind of local grown, brewed solutions that respond exactly to what people need and leverage on those solutions and push, including microfinance. Microfinance, I will say microfinance 2.0, because 1.0 has been too long on the thing and is not really effective. We need to start thinking about microfinance.
And so can you give us also examples of where you, either in Guinea or in other countries you've worked with DFIs and commercial banks to make that happen, to make that connection happen?
Yes, you know, for a long time, the single solution that most of the time was used is to put a line of credit in the commercial banks from the DFIs. That was long time, and it is still very, very, very much used. But it is important to go beyond that. Start looking at really solutions for financing, but this should be combined always with business development support. Okay? Because there is a tendency that there is a break between financing and business development. And sometimes if that bridge is not built, it's very difficult to be enough, effective enough. So in Guinea, for example, IFC, I hope Olivier will speak about that because it was his own project. In Guinea, IFC partnered with local banks to support some companies that are today becoming really champions in terms of food processing. And it is continuing now in the agricultural areas. And I will let him give more details on that. But it is, again, I'm saying, important to do, number one, make sure that the private sector is consulted properly and they participate in the policies. Number two, really support financing and business development, business support together.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Maybe it's a good point to transition to Lala, where you've been there, you are there as a domestic private sector. Maybe you can tell us what, as you grew your company and as you started and grew, what was the major need that you had? Is it the financing? Is it the guarantees? Is it the business support services that Prime Minister Mohammed was speaking about? Or is it the business environment? Tell us about your experience on the ground in the field.
I'm heard. Thank you for having me over. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I would like to start with a thorough introduction of my company to present who we are. Sodigas was founded in 1977. We are a company that has been around for a while now. Our main activities is LPG for clean cooking. And we distribute every year 100,000 tons of gas, and we have 60% of the market in Burkina Faso. Like any companies, to be able to sustain growth, we need equity, we need debt. And to be in a fragile country, the access to debt is very complicated. especially when you have a lot of capex investment to be done. The first time we approached IFC was in December 2020. Because we have a large project that we thought that could meet the minimum requirements of financing for IFC. And one of the reasons that we went for IFC as an investor is because of the reputation. We come from Burkina Faso. Even though we've been a fairly large medium company, we needed somebody that will be able, some kind of a proof, a quality proof of what type of company we were in Burkina Faso. Everyone knows that IFC is one of the most prestigious financial institutions in the world. In terms of due diligence, is one of the strictest one. When we talk about environmental and social standards, everybody refer to IFC as the one that have talk about ENS IFC standards. So because we want to strive for excellence, we said that, okay, the challenge that we want to take is the IFC challenge. If we're able to raise debt with IFC, that will send a signal to the market. So as I said, we approached IFC in December 2020. The first disbursement happened 3 years ago, 3 years later, in 2023. It was absolutely a big challenge for us to raise the debt with IFC for different reasons. One of the reasons that the difficulty that we had, it was because we're from a fragile country. So everything that was related to due diligence, everything that was related to ENS, that took us some time, but we're able to pass all of this process. Where we got the biggest difficulties is because we are in a fragile country, that means there's more risk. And IFC, from what I understand, is a AAA debt quotation. So they have to be able to make sure that they will recover whatever amount they would be lending. Today, my loan is, I think, is guaranteed at 150, and it could have been worse, to be honest. I have to say that we're very lucky to have the providential intervention of Sergio Pimenta, Aliou Maïga, and Olivier on the last stretch when he took over Aliou, that we're able to sit and say, okay, we have to have some warranties. That's true, it's risky, but we have to have some tools that is adapted. And from my experience, if you say that what we need, should we, because we're in a fragile country, should it be more difficult for us to raise debt, or should it be more easy? The real estate, for instance, have been growing for the last 20 years. But because there's coup d'etat, because there's terrorism, does it mean that the real estate will go down? Does it mean that they have to take more warranties? And there's some different tools that can be used. Of course, like I said, all of these objective factors that are warranties, etc., how can be adapted to our reality? And another challenge that we faced was also the timeline. It took a long time. We started the discussion before COVID. Imagine discussing a project before COVID in December 2020 and have your first disbursement after COVID with inflation, the system that have already changed, etc. So it also added more pressure because with time, there's a lot of risk also that is associated. And as a medium company in a fragile country, time is of essence. So if that's the kind of, we need speed in deciding whatever investment. But as I said, that was the difficulties, but we are able to raise the money in local currency, which was really good. And from what I understand, and the second time around should be faster. They will, they are learning from the process. So definitely that would be what we need to be able to keep growing.
And if you,
in my experience.
As you're scaling up now, as you move up the chain, let's say, of the scale, are you seeing different challenges now? What do you need now to get to the next level? And what is the next level, I guess?
Okay. The next level is to be a large company. I would like to be among the top 3 in my field in the energy sector in West Africa. The managing director was mentioning that this morning, that we will be the one that will stay around. We'll be the one that will create the job. We'll be the one that will provide the services. So for us, the next level, as I said, we're in Burkina Faso, but we started to become, we're also in Benin. We hope to be able to move to different countries. So that's a different set of challenges. One of the discussion that we had with IFC is like the advisory part. Like IFC have a lot of services for companies that are not well structured yet. They have the tools to be able to help themselves get to that level. But once you get to that level, we still need advisory. But we'll need an advisory, the kind of McKinsey, Boston Consulting, because it's plus pointu, it's more specific. And when we look at the type of services that these big firms provide, that's what takes a company from a medium size to a large size. To have IFC making that kind of alliances to accompany us in fragile country, that will be definitely a big bonus for us.
Thank you so much, and maybe we can hear from Alexandra as well, especially on, one of the challenges always mentioned is the high unpredictability of the operating environment. And you come from Haiti, and your company is there. Can you share with us some examples of how this challenge manifested itself for you and how you dealt with it?
Thank you for having me, first of all. I come from Haiti. For those, well, everybody knows Haiti has been on the news for quite some years now. But besides what we see in the news, there are still people living in Haiti and people hoping for a better day. And there are some companies continuing to invest in the future. That said, let me share examples of what it is like operating in a country like Haiti now. For example, the gangs right now control all the major accesses, all the major roads leading to the ports, whichever is the seaport or the borders, which means getting raw materials or even food, because the vast majority of food is imported and not produced, which is a big problem for the country. The gang can decide to block the customs. You cannot get anything out for 1 month. For example, and this happened to us before I came here. It was 1 month, end of January, beginning of February, nothing could go out of customs. It was totally blocked. The gangs were demanding a payout for each container coming out, or else they will never let any container go out. So the fuel is the same thing. The fuel has to come out of the port. So we spent 1 month without raw materials. We had some stock, and luckily for us, the police intervened last week, and we got some containers out. But if not, we would have been totally shut down. And when I say totally shut down, that happened to us last year. We were shut down for two months because there was no fuel in the country. Despite those problems, we continue to build strategies around those issues. For example, how did we deal with that? In the last 2 years, we had fuel issues, so we have now a bigger stock of fuel. So we said, okay, let's have 1 month. We're not gonna have a stock of fuel for 3 months. You have money down. It doesn't make sense, but 1 month stock of fuel. The raw materials, this can happen that we cannot get our raw materials on time. So let's build a 2 month stock of raw materials so we can continue operating. So each time we have to be creative and looking for ways to have business continuity. Because despite of all the problems, people still need to drink water, people still need to eat. So the demand is still there. To add to all those problems, we have the Biden parole program, which is draining the brains of the country. In our case, for CBC, we have lost a lot of qualified employees that went to the United States. And now replacing those employees is another challenge, added to all the other challenges we're facing nowadays. And when we're looking to replace them, 1 out of 10 candidates refuse to work in our area, because our area where the plant is located is a gang territory also. So we are subject to gang wars, and we have to deal around those issues. So to resume it, we have to be resilient. We hope for a better future. We know it's coming, and the investment are not going to stop, because we want to continue investing and being more resilient. That said, we have a project going on right now with the IFC, which is a solar project. It will be the biggest project in the Caribbean with storage, and we will be independent. We will not be completely, but 90% not dependent upon fossil energy, which is being more resilient towards all the problems that we could face in the future. I hope that answers. I could give more examples because every day is a challenge. We have around 500 direct employees at the plant. Coming to work, we have, for example, a chat, security chat, that advises us if it's safe to get to work or not. Each day, each morning, it's a routine. Let's check the chat. Is it safe? It might be safe now, and 1 minute after, it's not safe anymore. But we continue to hope, and we continue to strive for a better future.
Thank you so much. That goes to show the resilience of the private sector that we talked about this morning as well in the opening session. And so I assume you would agree with His Excellency that security is absolutely necessary.
Number one, security, well, in our case, security is number one. Without security, you cannot continue to operate.
And in terms of market, I mean, FCV markets can range from small to large, from 11 million to 50 million. In Haiti, you have around 11 million inhabitants. What does Haiti teach us about investing in small and medium-sized markets?
Haiti teaches you to be resilient, that's one, to be creative, because I'm going to share an example. A few years back, a large brewery brought the national brewery in Haiti, and they had some programs. Well, they're all over the world when I'm talking about a large brewery, and they have some plants in Africa, some breweries in Africa. So the first thing they said, Africa, Haiti, same. So let's duplicate whatever we did in Africa, let's do it in Haiti. And it did not go as they thought. Because we have to understand that each country is different. It's not the same. We might be the same origin. We might face the same problems, but each country has different way of thinking based on their past. So we have to really, if we want to invest in those markets, we have to really understand the way the people think, the way they operate, the way they live, which might be different from each country, and adapt our strategies based on this knowledge. But there is, I must say that when you talk about those countries, the fragile countries, we see the problems, but sometimes we don't see the opportunities. And there are big opportunities in those countries.
And you gave a really good example of the use of technology with, I assume, the chat. Is a WhatsApp chat or
a WhatsApp chat?
Yeah. Any other good examples of using digital technology for operating in such an environment?
Well, in our plant, we are ISO 9001 certified. So that's a major achievement we have. We're 3 years certified. We're going to renew the certification this year. So we have invested in a software called QualiOS, which enables us to track everything in the production, track the action plans. Everything is on this software. And the last project for this software will be to track the clients, to know how the clients, how much they're buying, to know how they're, how do you say, not operating, but to know their stock, to track all our major clients with a barcode, and then when the vendor comes, he will enter the code of the client, and we'll know exactly how much stock is stock rotation. So that's the major aspect. Besides that, we have also, due to the insecurity, we have GPS on all our vehicles, because our vehicles might get kidnapped somewhere, so we know which gang have a vehicle and trying to get the vehicles back. But each time you have to pay to get the vehicles back.
Wow. Amazing stories of operating on the ground. Thank you so much. And we'll move to you, Olivier. You've heard all this from our different speakers. First of all, from where you sit at the IFC, is this what you are having to support on a day-to-day basis, and how do you actually engage with clients on the ground on this? But also, kind of what we heard is that we need a lot of different and innovative approaches, right? Not the standard approaches. It has to be customized to each country. It has to take into account the size and level of the companies that you are working with, but it also has to address the issues around risk. So how are you dealing with this very difficult environment for supporting investments there?
Thank you, Rafat. Let me also start by thanking the esteemed panelists, clients and partners, and also the organizers. I'd like to also recognize our team working on fragility in IFC, led by my sister Jumoke, and the whole team here, both Joanna and everybody, for putting together this panel and for supporting our activities in those countries. As we heard this morning, unfortunately, Rafat, to your question, and the Prime Minister mentioned that, despite all the efforts, the number of fragile countries is growing in Africa and in the world. We have those countries affected by ongoing conflict, but we have a much more number of fragile countries, right? Whether they were in the conflict previously, whether because they are facing elements of fragilities, conflict, climate, so on and so forth. So to your question, yes, I can only count the number of countries in Africa that cannot fit in the category of fragile, right? And what also we have seen, unfortunately, is that the element of fragility is a global issue, even in countries or in regions such as Europe, which used to be enjoy a very hard-earned peace, went back into those elements of fragility. So it's a global issue, and so it's not only us. We all live in those elements. So to your question, now from where we sit in IFC and the World Bank Group, I think I don't want to repeat what has been said very eloquently by our boss this morning, but the Prime Minister mentioned that when it comes to conflict, the main driver is actually the lack of hope. Lack of hope. And because there is no job, there is no future. So in the previous panel, someone mentioned the daunting choice that a young person is to choose from in Niger or in the Sahel region. If you live in the Sahel today, in the region facing the devastating impact of climate change. For some populations that used to live from the cattle, livestock, there is no water anymore. So for those 100,000 of people, between 10 and 15 or 10 and 20, if there is no hope, they'll go and find whatever hope they think they can find somewhere. So if Lala, and Sodigas or Alexandra can actually create some hope. Now, he said, even in Haiti, they're employing 500, they're maintaining 500 jobs, right? Direct, plus, exactly. So in Burkina Faso, in Niger, the local private sector is actually either creating or maintaining those jobs. Jobs means hope for those people who are employed and for people who live through that. So this, and the Prime Minister was saying that in a separate conversation we were having earlier, this idea of supporting local private sector is not only about development, it's actually about maintaining or creating conditions for peace in those countries. So I think it's important to remember that and then put it in the broader context of what we're talking about. Now, when we talk about local private sector, before talking about what we do as IFC, I think it's important to go back to what Lala was saying. What do they need? They need security, first and foremost. Alexander just told us without security, a minimum, very basic minimum of rule of law, it's extremely difficult to operate, or they operate at a cost that might become unsustainable at some point. Then you need to create the minimum conditions. It was said earlier today, before going to the points that Lara mentioned about equity and debt and the price of it and the time you get it, etc. Level playing field, the rule of law. So one of the challenges that confronted our SMEs and informal economy, etc. This is a conversation we usually have with our friends from the IMF and from the bank and in development finance institutions. So why do we have such a large share of companies in informal economy? It's not because these people are thieves or are like to be in the informal sector. It's because they make a decision, a rational decision, that it's better for them to remain in the informal sector. Most of the time, it's because they don't trust the system they are working in. They don't trust the justice system. They don't trust the tax administration. They don't trust the custom administration. They feel more secure to remain in the informal sector. So what the Prime Minister was saying, the minimum condition, so this is the debate with our friends from IMF and the bank, say, if you want to increase tax revenue, we can actually talk about increasing the tax percentage, but it will be more successful if we talk about growing the base. How do we bring these people in the formal sector? We create the conditions, and we use technology, etc., to make sure there is transparency so they can come in the sector. In our interaction with the government and His Excellency the Prime Minister, we had this conversation when he was in the role. We tell our governments in our countries, particularly those governments in fragile countries, the people who will actually help you get out of those elements of fragility, as His Excellency the Prime Minister of Chad was telling us, the first people you need to take care of is your local private sector. Create the condition, and they don't need money. The first thing they need is protection and care. Create the conditions so they can come, including, as the Prime Minister said, including simplify rules. By the way, let's start by applying the laws that are already there. When I had an opportunity to serve in Guinea as a IFC resident representative back then, we worked very hard with our friends from the bank to create the first commercial court in the country. That was the demand from the local private sector. They were telling us each time there is a commercial dispute between us, we need to go and sit in the traditional justice court. It takes 3 years to settle a dispute. The commercial banks we lend money to were telling us when there is a problem with our customer and we need to exercise the collateral, the guarantee we have, it takes us average 2 years. That's too long. So we actually helped create that commercial court. And that's what I mean by the rule of law. Once we have that, then we go back to, for us, to really designing instruments and programs that help us reach those local champions. So Lala Boli with Sodigas is a very good example. We have hundreds of examples of companies like Lala Boli. Entrepreneurs who work every day, work very hard, and try to, by the way, do it by the book, as she said, but they don't have access to finance or to the right support, finance, technical assistance, etc. So together with the fragility team in IFC, we have actually put together a program called the Local Champions Program, or Local Champions Initiative. And the idea is very simple, very simple. How do we identify the Sodigas in each of the fragile countries we work in? We need to identify them. We need to understand their needs. We provide them technical assistance in areas such as environmental, social, financial management, governance, and then we bring to them the right product they need, whether it's equity, whether it's guarantee, whether it's debt. It takes time, as she mentioned, because we are not necessarily always equipped to do that. So we had to change, to adapt, but we understand today there is no going back to that. It doesn't mean that we will not continue to support FDIs or large project infrastructure, because we need power, we need roads, we need all these big companies, but we need to support them. The last point, we also designing, working with new innovative institutions to reach out to SMEs and farmers, because farming is business, as the Prime Minister said. So we're leveraging digital banks, digital platforms, we're leveraging fintech companies. We need to ride on the wave of technology to be able to reach those underserved parts of the private sector, local private sector in our markets.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Olivier. I think we're running out of time, but we have about 10 minutes for Q&A from the audience. And appreciating the people who are joining us online, we'll start with that. And Joanna, maybe you can pick a couple questions or summarize which questions have been coming in and read them for us.
So thank you. So picking up on the
and sorry, while you do that, if anyone has any questions here, if you don't mind, there's a mic on each side of the room, and you can just stand up and line up for the mic, and we can take a few questions from the room as well.
So I think picking up on the theme of jobs, we have one question focusing on, could you share some success stories of the domestic private sector creating jobs during times of conflict and or violence? So one around the theme of jobs. And then we have a second question around the theme of non-financial risks. So what are the non-financial risks for the domestic private sector in FCS? And how have you managed some of those risks? So I think those are the two questions to focus from online.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Any questions from the room? Otherwise, we can answer maybe these questions while waiting for some.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I would first like to start by thanking all of the panelists for their time and the wisdom that they've shared with us. My question is that it was stated that in order to build the private sector, there must be security is a necessary condition. In that case, I was wondering, given the many examples that we have here on this panel and also outside, for example, I think of Mo Ibrahim, who builds a telecommunications company in the Congo, especially in protracted, as conflicts are becoming more and more protracted, what in those cases can be done to help strengthen the private sector in insecure and fragile contexts? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Okay, go ahead, yes.
Thank you, Maurice Adoni. So I work in Haiti. I come from Cote d'Ivoire, and now I'm based in Haiti. My question is, the World Bank Group doesn't want to finance insecurity because they consider these aspects are political. But as Olivier mentioned, that's a very critical issue. If there's no security, we can't do everything. So the panel, what kind of advice can we have regarding this question? That's very tough for us, for Eri.
That's a great question as well. Thank you. Okay, let's take these questions. Maybe on non-financial risks, if we hear from Lala and Alexander, what non-financial risks are you having to deal with in your companies and your environments?
A non-financial risk, I will definitely go in the direction of human resource, because for instance, my payroll, because I have to recruit more and more. Don't want to use the word capable, but more specialized people to manage the company. And when you are in a fragile company, it costs you more. So the human resource, the quality of the staff that we have to be able to train them a lot. So that I would say that if I'm not looking purely on the non-number part of it, I would say that it will be human resource. And also I'm losing a lot of employees to Canada or the States on a regular basis.
Well, the same problem. We're having the same problem also. But besides that, the technology we use, for example, our production lines, we rely on foreign technicians from the company. For example, we use a company called Seidel, which is a French company. But for the programmation, they control the programmation. So if we are down for a technical issue, we usually call a technician. He comes in, they bill us. Right now, it's been 2 years that we cannot get any support from them because Haiti is listed as level 4 travel advisory, do not travel. So they cannot send anybody. Nobody is willing to come to Haiti right now. So that's a major risk for us also. So we rely on support via Zoom, we're trying to be innovative in ways. It helps us train also our local technician. But that's a major risk and major issue these days.
Thank you so much. And Prime Minister, maybe there was a question on sharing some success stories of creating jobs during conflict. I think we have 2 very excellent examples of that here. But if you want to share any other examples, but I thought you might have something to say about security and the question of what can be done to help the private sector dealing with the reality of insecure environments. And then maybe also if you have anything to say on the World Bank and other MDBs financing security, but that's a question I want to hear from Olivier as well on.
That's for Olivier. But I can give my opinion. I think it is clear, the examples that have been given today shows you need security. If you don't have security, it's extremely difficult. And you have situations where you have what I call good-willing governments in place, and a situation where you have a government that cannot produce the necessary conducive environment to work. And I think one of the countries that is example is yours, where you have really challenged. The government cannot provide that security, and you are going through all these difficulties. In the morning, during the discussion, one of the things that Anna was saying is that the bank development institutions must remain engaged. Whatever the conditions, they must remain engaged in order to work to improve the situation. You know, for two reasons. We know that fragility creates poverty, but poverty also generates fragility. So it's le serpent qui se mord la queue. So we need to remain in to break that cycle and help to go out. And under those conditions, even if the DFIs do not want to support security directly, it is necessary to build partnership conditions with others, the UN, the others that can bring support and try to help in fragility. See, I don't want to go too far, but I just want to see the example of Ukraine today. The entire Europe, the entire world, United States is supporting them. Give 1/10 of that to some poor countries in some areas, the problem will be resolved. You know, I take the courage to say that clearly. So, and where I am now, I'm a retired man, I can say anything. I don't need jobs, you know. So, I think it is important. It is important that we have to understand that in those fragile countries, there are people that are living there. And these are courageous people. People who are full of resilience. People who are trying to strive just to have a normal life, to be able to educate their children, give them health, and move forward. They are not asking more. You see, when other people are having ambitions to go very far, their ambition is only one: have a normal life. Just have a normal life. And I think if you look at the world today, the way it is going, the world have the means to be able to support security in those countries. It is extremely important. Otherwise, we'll be spending money, shooting outside, and nothing can be solved. It is painful to see Haiti where it is today. It is painful to see in the Sahel also what is happening. So I think clearly, if we decide to keep engaged, we have to find a way to help in getting the security in place.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Maybe the last minute for you, Olivier. What do you think can be done by DFIs, MDBs to address the security challenge?
No, I will. The Prime Minister responded to my good friend Maurice's question, but I will add in what the World Bank Group is doing in many countries in the Africa region. I think so beyond the question or behind the question is the cost of maintaining security and the cost of security, right? So what we have seen in many countries is the fact that the fiscal deficit has increased because of that. And I have to say that the World Bank and the IMF have come strongly in supporting government budgets, not the security cost, but by substitution, by taking more on other expenses, education, agriculture, infrastructure. They create the room for those governments to spend their own resources or the resources they get from other partners on security. I think it's very important also to understand that, and it was said this morning by Anna and during the first panel, the World Bank Group, as much and the IMF, as much as we would like to take on all the challenges, including development challenges, we cannot do it by ourselves. I think we need to be humble and work with our partners, the UN and the others, so that we can all approach those challenges from where we are best suited to do so. So that would be my response to that question. But then let me very rapidly address on the successes, right? Because Lala and Alexander are good examples, but I invite whomever has those questions or wants to know, please look at some of our publications on what we are doing in fragile countries. You'll see amazing stories, amazing examples of thriving businesses, creating and maintaining jobs in agriculture, in digital. Tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, we have actually Mr. Koulibaly. Dauda Koulibaly will be on the closing panel. He created the first homegrown fintech company in Mali. He employs hundreds of young, talented engineers, a lot of women, by the way, in that group. They actually move money in those areas of Mali that nobody can reach to today. It's homegrown fintech company created in Mali by Malian young entrepreneurs. We have hundreds of those stories across the Sahel, across the Africa region, in many fragile countries. They just need some support from governments, their government, from us, DFIs. They just need that little push so that they can take on addressing the challenges that those countries are confronted with.
Great. Thank you so much, Olivier. And of course, we only had an hour for this panel, but it's a beginning of a conversation that we hope we can continue through these 2 days and going forward as well. Mostly to keep hope alive, as was mentioned by many of my colleagues, and to continue creating jobs and having especially young people hopeful for a better future. So I hope you'll join me in thanking our panelists. And thank you for making my job easy to stick to time. And I hope we'll continue outside. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Please make your way down to the Preston Auditorium for the Changemakers session.